First, every election, we're told, is the most important ever. But tomorrow's Victorian election really does matter because it's a referendum on the most power-hungry Premier in living memory and the most inept and ethically challenged government in the country. Under Daniel Andrews, Melbourne became the world's most locked-down city, with curfews, roadblocks, identity checks, riot police using tear gas and rubber bullets to disperse protesters, and a pregnant woman arrested in front of her children in her kitchen over a Facebook post. 801 people died because the Victorian government used dodgy private security guards to run hotel quarantine, but a judicial inquiry set up to fail couldn't get a straight answer from anyone. So no one was actually held responsible for the fatal decision, certainly not the Premier himself.
I don't have the luxury of looking backwards.
I was not involved in any of that decision-making whatsoever.
I can't specifically recall. I have given this quite some thought, Ms Elliard. I'm not certain. I can't specifically recall. I'm afraid I have tried to search my recall of this and I simply can't.
Nor could WorkSafe Victoria, run by a former Labor staffer, now chaired by a Labor mate, find anyone to blame for the hundreds and hundreds of lives lost. The corruption inquiries, likewise, they find fault everywhere, including with his Labor Party and his own government, but somehow no one ever loses their job. Somehow too there, the Premier's always interviewed behind closed doors, never grilled in public, unlike his political opponents. In Daniel Andrews' Victoria, one official body can go to court to prevent the pre-election publication of material that might be adverse to the Premier, while another can announce an inquiry into the opposition leader for a dodgy deal that never actually happened because he prevented it. In Daniel Andrews' Victoria, the Premier's wife isn't breathalyzed after a serious car accident, nor is the smashed up car impounded. Instead, the Premier's allowed to drive it away from the scene of the accident. And similarly, no one's curious about an accident that puts the Premier into intensive care and has him off work for 3 months. And yes, give him credit, 67 level crossings may have been eliminated, but nearly every big project is way over budget and way behind schedule. The public service is bloated and still working from home, with the Ombudsman now investigating just how politicised they've become. Economically, the standard of living in Victoria, well, for residents, they're falling behind other states. And Victoria's debt is set to overtake that of New South Wales, Queensland and Tasmania combined. This election's not a contest between two sides. It's a referendum on one man. The most secretive, the most ruthless, the most unprincipled Premier anyone can remember. Listen again to former Victorian Police Chief, former Chief Commissioner Kel Blair, say that this is the most corrupt government he's ever seen.
We are entitled to have governments that are ethical, accountable and competent. And I don't believe we have any of those things at the moment.
Here's the King of Melbourne Radio, Neil Mitchell. Hasn't gone on Mitchell's show, the Premier, for 5 years. Well, Mitchell's saying this is the worst government he's ever seen.
I think he's more confident, he's more arrogant, he's more dictatorial, he's more successful, more determined.
He's ruthless.
Oh, he's ruthless, there's no question. He's ruthless and he's very clever. I've not seen a worse government, I don't reckon. I've been 50 years in journalism. Haven't seen a worse government.
Here's one of his own former ministers, someone inside the Labor Party he appointed to the front bench, who reached out to me, so scared of payback. We've got an actor saying her words, explaining how he bullies women especially.
He says he's a champion for women. He'll stand there in the firing line and do all that, but then he treats women appallingly behind closed doors. And if you're down, he'll kick you to keep you down.
And here's Ian Cook, wrongly charged, driven out of business, when a council inspector, he says, planted a slug on his premises to advantage a council-run enterprise set up with a multi-million-dollar grant from Daniel Andrews.
So 2009 is when Community Chef starts.
And what's Community Chef?
Community Chef is an organisation that was funded by the Andrews when he was Health Minister. He gave them $6 million to get started. They got $10 million from Anthony Albanese when he was the infrastructure minister.
Sometimes the government's so bad that normal political preferences don't apply. As a respected former federal Labor MP, Michael Danby, says, how could any Labor person tolerate a government that uses rubber bullets and tear gas against its own people?
We didn't have to, Dan Andrews, shoot people with rubber bullets. Can you imagine that a Labor Party did that? In the old days, there would have been a meeting of 5,000 Labor Party members and he would have been condemned.
Well, tomorrow Victorians have a chance to show their mettle. We can let the world know whether Daniel Andrews is the standard we walk by, or we can show them we're better than that. And please, if you want to change the Premier, you can only vote Liberal or National, because voting for the Greens or any of the others in a deal cooked up by the preference whisperer Glenn Drury will just produce a Labor-Green minority government which will make everything even worse. It's not a choice of left and right tomorrow. It's a choice, a simple choice between right and wrong. And a referendum on one man alone, and that's the Premier, Daniel Andrews. Please, Victoria, send him a message and make it loud and clear.